Okay, so since today is the first lesson, I want to give a kind of introduction, overview of the topic we will study, how we will study, and that kind of thing. I'd also like to, create more of a group. So when we learn online, nobody meets anybody, and nobody knows anybody in the class. So I'm going to try to get to know the group a little better this year. Before I do that, I have a little gift. Yay! Everyone's happy to receive a gift. Yeah, well, you say yay now. So at the end of every academic year, the department, right, the Department of English Studies, Eigo Bungaku Bunka Senko, produces, what's it gonna be? Drum roll. And it's a journal that has some of the best student papers from last year, and you get your own copy. Woohoo! Yeah. So, because it's COVID, I'm not going to ask you to pass them along. I'm going to give each book to each person. Okay. So please just wait a moment. And so tonight, when you can't fall asleep and you're looking for some way to fall asleep, if you open this book, you have great success in falling asleep. Actually, the idea is you see this and you become inspired. You become excited. You say, wow, I want my paper to be in next year's journal. So I will work extra hard. So here you go. So the bottom paper, which is written in English, Effects of Music, Tempo, and Lyrics on Physical Activity, is by Yuki Kuwashima. That was a student in my seminar. And her paper was looking at, she did an experiment that tested whether listening to music influenced physical activity, if you listen to slow music or fast music. And of course, the answer is yes. But she was also interested in whether or not listening to English music and Japanese music influenced the way people perform physical activity. And her part-time job is in a gym. So she had several participants who were regular members of the gym. So anyhow, you can see what kind of research papers students write. And then there are also other papers about bungaku, which are not interesting. No, that's not true. Of course they're interesting. They're just different topics. Okay. So when you have free time, you're riding the train home, or as I said before, if you're trying to fall asleep tonight and you can't, just turn open to one of these interesting stories and gently fall asleep. Okay. To begin, now if you've had courses with me before, you've done this exercise. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take out a phone or a tablet or a laptop or some device you can use to access the internet. And if you don't have one, that's fine. You don't have to do it, but it will allow everyone to participate. And you just open a browser, like Safari on an iPhone or whatever I don't have an Android phone. But at the very top, Pollev, pollev.com/chuo, and that will bring up the questions I'm going to show you. And so we're going to do some of these at the beginning, just to kind of warm up the class to get started. And then we'll do some at the end of class which will be to review some of the content of today's lecture and lesson and discussion. Now, if you don't want to enter your name, you can just press skip, right, on that first page. I don't record who answers what or anything. But it's nice to begin by asking you, how are you? It's the first week of school. Some people are extra tired. Some people are, is it not? Oh, no, there you go, okay. Some people are, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so it may be a good time or a bad time. So usually, for classes that are at 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock, I usually get more responses over here. And classes that are at 9 o'clock in the morning, I get answers over here, right? So yeah, okay, so there's a mix of, some people are doing quite well, some are so-so. Nobody's having a terrible day, that's good to hear. At least, maybe if I ask this at the end of the class, you'll move this way. Okay, so let's just find out who is in the room. So if you could just touch on the map whereabouts you were born. Now, if you were not born in Japan, just touch over here someplace. So I touch over there. And if you were born in Japan, just click where in Japan you were born. So somebody's in Sapporo, and this one moved. I don't know the difference between what? Really, most people are from Kanto. Yeah, okay. Great. Looks good. Okay, thank you. All right, so there's kind of a little bit of variety. Nobody's down here. Somebody in Hokkaido, Aomori. Oh, that's a good test of my knowledge of Japanese geography. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Now, I'd just like to know when you were born. What month were you born? Were you born in April? Oh, April. Who was born in April? April what? 5th? Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Last week. Oh. Anybody? April?
16.
16? Oh my.
Yeah!
Oh, a couple more days. And you turned
20.
18?
22.
22. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow, more people in April than any other month. So it must be 3 people. Who's the other April? Oh, 2 more. Oh, yes. April 10th? You just, happy birthday. Just happened. And? Oh, wait a minute. The 10th gets applause, but the 5th doesn't? Oh, come on. And? 10th also. Whoa. Now I have to do this every month. Okay. Excellent. All right, thank you. And then it looks like we're well, here's a word we'll use in class, distributed. We're spread out. We're well distributed throughout the year. There is no month with nobody. None of them. So that's kind of lucky. And I didn't add mine. I'm also in July. So I'm curious about how long it takes you to come to Chuo, since Chuo is the kind of university that people often come from home. Some people are close, some people are far away. So does it take you more than 2 hours, between 1 and 2 hours, between 30 minutes and 1 hour, or less than 30 minutes? Wow, that's fantastic, less than 30 minutes. And nobody is more than 2 hours. Huh. Usually I have at least 1 student more than 2 hours. Okay, good. The students who live very far away, when we had online learning, it was kind of convenient because you didn't have to take the transportation all the way both ways, especially if it's every day. Here I'll give you a little quiz. See how well you can guess my. When do you guess I first moved to Japan? Did I come in 2020? Did I come to Japan in 2008, 2002, 1999, or 1995? Now you probably don't know the answer. I'm just asking you to guess, right? But then I'll tell you. Oh, I see. I just realized I'm not seeing the responses. I miss. Have I told you? It's true. I came to Japan in 1995, which is before many of you. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. 2002, my son was born in Shizuoka. 2008, I came to Chuo. 2020, well, of course, not 2020. Yes, that's right. People often ask me, how tall are you? So if you could guess my height. Do you think I'm 199 centimeters, 194 centimeters, 191 centimeters, 189 centimeters, 185 centimeters? Oops. This is great. So this is what we call a normal distribution, right? So you find something. Oh no, so it's no left. So you can find equal numbers, say 194, 191. Nobody. Well, 185. Somebody thinks okay. The correct answer is 191. 191. I was never 194. Oh. 3 years ago, so I go to the doctor every year, they measure you, it used to be 192. But then 2 years ago, they started to say 191. So I think it's starting. So maybe in 10 years, I'll... So now I'd like to know about you. I'd like you to think of a one word to describe your personality. Some people in the room already know you. Some people in the room don't know you. If you were to describe yourself with one word, and it's anonymous, right? So your name doesn't appear here, just the words you say. Stubborn, okay, that's honest, good, yes. Energetic, that's lucky. Somebody in the room is funny, that's good. Friendly. Now, you'll notice that friendly is larger than the others. That means that more people have written the same word. The size of the word reflects the number of times that word has been written. So shy, unique, calm. So I guess I'll find the calm student and the energetic student and put you together. Or thoughtful, more shy, unique, modest. Excellent. Troublesome. Troublesome? What? Okay. Thoughtful, that's a great word. Thoughtful. It's funny to use the word modest, because modest means, nothing special, just little me, right? But I'm modest. It's kind of being modest, but not modest. Yeah? Troublesome, energetic, calm, kind, excellent, friendly, antisocial. So antisocial is someone who, it's not the same as unfriendly, because antisocial just means you don't interact with other people naturally or easily. Okay? Unfriendly, so antisocial is kind of, what's the word? Antisocial is kind of, it's neither positive nor negative. It's neutral. Whereas unfriendly is negative. Right? If someone's unfriendly, then that's, unfriendly is different from not friendly. Unfriendly is a kind of negative. But antisocial just means not social. At least the English, at least as far as I understand it. So in terms of English language skills, right, so everyone is a student in the Department of English Studies, and different people find different language skills challenging. So I'd be curious to see, as a group, which skills do you want to improve the most? Now, I realize you probably want to improve more than one of them. Maybe you say all of them, or these two. But I'd like you to just choose one. That's the most important, not important, but the one that you think is important for you to continue improving. So this kind of question, they're ranked first, second, third, fourth. It means the most, it doesn't say the number of people. It just means the greatest number of people said speaking, the second greatest said listening, the third is writing, and the last is reading. Now, I'll be explaining this in just a moment, but this year in this course, we're going to focus primarily on listening. How do we understand spoken language? When someone speaks to me, how do I understand words out of sound? Right? So if I were to speak a different language, right? Si je commence à parler français, où sont les fins et les buts des mots? Si vous ne connaissez pas la langue, il est difficile à comprendre même le sens, même les mots. Right? So if you don't understand the language, all you hear is just sound. And you can't really tell where's the beginning of the word and where's the end of the word. But when you know the language, even though the speech is continuous and fluent, you still notice words that come out of the speech. How does that happen? That's the kind of topic we want to learn about. And then, how does that happen in a non-native language? So when I listen to Japanese, when you listen to English, when we listen to, I don't know, French or German or Chinese or something, how do we hear the words differently? So when I listen to fluent English, and you listen to fluent English, there may be something different about the process of listening. When you listen to Japanese and I listen to Japanese, there may be a difference in how we hear the words out of the continuous sound. So speaking and listening are directly connected, since every time you listen, someone is speaking. So the two are impossible to completely disconnect, but we can obviously focus on one or the other. I'd just be curious to know that if the world were able to change, which means nowadays it's very difficult to travel internationally, but if you could visit an English-speaking country, which country would you like to visit? There are several. Now, if you'd like to visit Vietnam, that's great, but that's not an English-speaking country. I'd be interested to know what English-speaking countries you would like to visit. And you'll see the order of the countries will change depending on the number of people. Now, I don't know why Canada is written twice. Huh, that's curious. Oh, Malta is a great name. So Malta, they speak English and Maltese. Right? Maltese is a really interesting language because it's similar to Hebrew and Arabic, but kind of unique in that way. Canada, so I'm not sure why America appears twice like that. It's supposed to just add numbers, so it might be like Canada with a space or something, and Canada with no space. I don't know why Hyde is there. I don't know. Okay. So lots of people for America, a few people for Canada, Australia. Okay, great. Huh. But nobody said the place where English comes from. Nobody said England. Right? See. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I only have a couple more, then we'll move on. Besides English, what other foreign language would you like to learn? Maybe one you already studied, or maybe one you have not studied but you're interested in. What would be another foreign language that interests you? French? Spanish? Russian? Arabic? Excellent. Spanish again? Korean? Spanish is spoken in actually quite a large number of countries. Right? All of South America, except for Brazil, they speak Spanish. In Chile, Argentina, Venezuela, El Salvador. Arabic is also spoken in many countries, in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Iraq. French is spoken also in several countries. French is spoken, of course, in France, but also in Quebec, in Canada, in New Brunswick, or Nouveau-Brunswick in Canada. Also several countries in Africa, like the former French colonies in Africa. And also some French islands in the Pacific. Right? So Tahiti, they speak French. New Caledonia, they speak French. And Chinese. Yeah. Excellent. That topic will come back. So now I'd be curious to know, after 2 years of online learning, some people love it. Other people hate it. Some people, eh. How do you feel about online learning? Now, it's a little bit difficult to answer because you only have a chance to answer one. Right? So in my case, for example, I would want to put one here and here. Because for me, it really depends on the course. Right? If I have a large lecture with 80 students, online's great, because then students can access the content at their own pace. They can watch recordings. They can do different things. But in classes that require interaction, I don't know about you, but for me, it was very, very difficult. I never fully succeeded in having very interactive lessons. But everybody has lots of experience now, so you are capable of answering that question. But so it's quite a range. There's a greater range, so more differences than we saw in how people feel today. Last one is just, any questions? But if you have, yeah, I'll give you a minute. If you have any question, I'll answer any question. You can type it in, or I will move on to get started on. That's embarrassing, actually. I had a very small lunch. What was your lunch today? My lunch today was one shiomusubi from 7-Eleven. Right? Family Mart has changed to 7-Eleven. I don't know why, but this morning at about 8 o'clock in Tatsukawa, there was an enormous line of people. So the monorail was so full the train went like 4 trains before I could get on. So I just sat in the corner and did some work. I had a computer, I had a book, and it was fine. But when I got to this monorail station and entered the 7-Eleven, like so many things were already sold, and the onigiri were completely empty except one, and it had fallen down in the back. So because I'm tall, I could see it, but everybody else thought they were all gone, and so I said, so that one remaining shio musubi is what I had for lunch, with something to drink. Oh, they're going too fast. How was your spring break? Boring. My spring break was boring. Both my son, who goes to university in America, and my wife, whose mother is a bit sick, she was also in America. I have a daughter who's in high school, but her high school was off during March. So we just had a boring, boring March. Yeah. What time did I get up today? Same as every day. I usually get up 5:30. 5:30. Yay! 5:30. Yeah. My favorite artist? You mean like my favorite artist? The word artist can apply to musical artist or like drawing, painting artist. Who is your favorite artist? Wow. Who's my favorite artist? Well, among painters, I haven't really looked at art in a long time, but I used to collect like posters of a French artist named Georges Seurat. He paints like kind of impressionism. Musical artists, I like quite a large range, so I would say, who's my latest one? The only one I ever saw live in Tokyo was Taylor Swift. My daughter and I went to Taylor Swift at the Tokyo Dome, and I always tell my daughter, she looked right at me. My daughter doesn't believe me, but I tell her we connected from across the way. So she's not really my favorite, but she's the one that comes to mind. Yeah? Japanese artists, there's a woman from Hokkaido, when I was living in Hokkaido. There used to be 3, now there are 2. In Dreams Come True, there was Yoshida Miwa, is an amazing singer. Yeah? Did you eat sakura mochi this year? No. I don't know if I have ever had sakura mochi. No. How fluent is Japanese? I think you mean how fluent is your Japanese, right? How fluent is, it's himitsu desu ne. In the classroom, I always speak English. But as you know, I've lived in Japan longer than some of you. So the answer is I do okay. I'm able to manage my life entirely in Japanese. Although I will say, people ask me, in my family, we have me and my wife and my 2 children, none of us has any Japanese blood. My wife's family is from America, and then her ancestors are from Germany or someplace. And my family is also from America and Canada, and our ancestors are from Ireland and Norway or something. So I don't know how to answer fluent. I'm an A. On the Sefer score, I don't really know. Maybe if we meet after class, we can have a conversation in Japanese, but not in the classroom. If you get $1 million, what do you want to do? Well, of course, I will not quit my job because I love to work here. $1 million, what do you want to do? Well, $1 million today is not so great. I don't know. I would, gosh, I never thought about that. I would buy some flowers for my wife.
Oh.
Not $1 million worth of flowers. I don't know. What is your favorite drink? Oh my gosh. My favorite drink, well, it changes from time to time. Lately, in the vending machine, there's this pink kind of sapuri, or I don't amino, something, yeah. I like that. Alcoholic drinks, I like gin and tonic. Other drinks, I don't like soda very much, like Coca-Cola and those things. When is your birthday? Oh, yeah, please write it down and bring in a card, yes. It's easy to remember. It's Tanabata.
Oh.
Yeah, a very lucky day. In fact, I told you I came to Japan in 1995, right? Well, 1995 is the Western year. Do you remember what year in Japan was 1995? Heisei 7年. So my first birthday in Japan was 7年7月7日. 777. Yeah. Are you rich? Only in happiness. No, I'm not rich. I mean, I have a house, but I don't have a car. Yeah. My favorite movie. I do have a favorite movie. No one has ever seen it, but I'll tell you anyhow.
Okay.
The movie is called Memento. 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 The word memento is something you use to remember something, like a memento. So, for example, if my father gave me a watch before he died, this would be a memento of my father. Right? The movie Memento is about a man. At the very beginning of the movie, there's a kind of crime, and someone breaks into the house and kills the wife and injures the husband. The husband's injury is he has brain damage. Because of the brain damage, he can't remember anything. Well, that's not true. He remembers everything before the injury. He can't remember anything new. So if someone comes into the room and talks to him, he has a conversation, and the person leaves. The same person comes back in the room, he meets them for the first time. Okay? Now, that's interesting, okay, fine. Now, the man's goal is to solve his wife's, solve the crime, right? Who killed his wife, right? Who was that did that? He wants to do that. And so in order to do that without a memory, he has to come up with some way to do that. But what's absolutely amazing about the movie is the movie begins at the end of the story. So the first scene in the movie is the last scene of the story. So you see what happens, and then the next scene came right before that. And then the next scene came right before that. So you in the audience feel just like him. Because we don't know what happened before, and then we find out next what happened before. It's amazing. It's the only movie I ever saw, and I watched it at my house, in Shizuoka, actually, on DVD, and then immediately, I got to the end of the movie, said, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And I pushed play again. And I watched the whole movie a second time right now. And then, because it was a DVD, it had a special function, and I think only that DVD, because it was kind of a special movie, they added a feature that allowed you to watch the movie in the opposite order. So you could change the setting, and then you could watch the story from the actual beginning of the story and then follow it all the way through. It was amazing. Oh, that's fine. It's not a new movie. It's like more than 15 years old, but Memento. There are lots of other movies I like too. I mean, we just saw, for example, Free Guy. Free Guy, is that what it's called? Ryan Reynolds. He's in a video game. Yeah. My favorite food? I don't have favorite food. I don't know. Favorite food. Favorite food. I guess in general, Indian. I like Indian food, Indian curry, like maton kare and something called pork vindaloo. It's quite very spicy. It's good. Do I have a favorite Japanese place? Hachioji, of course. Everybody's the same, no? Favorite Japanese place? Well, I like it. Well, it depends on a place to visit or a place to live. Where do I like to go? There is a nice place. You will probably not know it anywhere. In Aichiken, there's a valley, the Kiso Valley, and you can hike between two small towns. One's called Tsumago, and the other's called Magome. And it's very convenient because you can arrive in either town by train, and then you can give them your luggage, and they will send your luggage to the next town, and you just hike through the woods, and there's a trail, and it takes a couple hours, but it's beautiful, and it's cool. In the summertime, because it's in the woods and kind of in the mountains, it's a bit cooler, and yeah, nice. So I highly recommend the hike between Magome and Tsumago. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, that was more than I wanted to do, but that's fine. I'm going to stop that. I think that was the last thing. And so what I'd like to do is introduce the topic of L2 speech comprehension. And then we'll do a kind of discussion exercise. And then we will answer some questions again using the poll everywhere format. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to... So L2 speech comprehension, well, this requires me to identify the different, oh no, that's not very good. What's the difference between L1 and L2? Have you seen this expression before? L1, L2? What is L1 and L2?
For example, for us, L1 is Japanese.
For you?
Yeah.
Right.
For me,
right.
Is L1 is Japanese, L2 is English.
Right.
Totally.
Right? So in general, what does L1 mean? Native language or first language. Right? The 1 means first language. And L2? Second language or non-native language. Because sometimes you might be interested in L1, L2, L3, which would be third language, right? But sometimes the term L2 includes L2, L3, L4, L5. So if you have studied as a non-native language, English and French and Chinese, we sometimes simply talk about native language and non-native language. And the term L2 sometimes means non-native language without paying attention to whether or not there's more than one non-native language. However, recently, L2, L3 has become an interesting topic. People have started to ask whether or not acquiring L3 is more strongly influenced by your knowledge of L2 or by your knowledge of L1. So in your case, probably everybody, well, most of you spoke Japanese before English, I guess. Many of you, English was your first non-native language. And then when you start to study, let's say, German, is learning German influenced by your knowledge of English or your knowledge of Japanese more? And to be honest, we don't know. There are reasons why it looks like L2 has a stronger influence on L3 in some cases. And there are other cases where it looks like L1 has a stronger influence The reason it's not clear is because there are lots of different language acquisition experiences. So the particular combinations of languages turns out to be important. So in Europe, for example, there are lots of people in rather small countries that learn more than one second language, more than one non-native language. So in Belgium, for example, there are two national languages. There's a form of Dutch called Flemish. Flemish is one of the official languages in Belgium, and French is the other. And generally, not perfectly, but generally, people in the north of the country tend to speak Flemish, Dutch. It's close to Holland. And people in the south tend to speak French, and it's kind of close to the French, to France. And in addition, they usually learn English. So most students who go to high school in Belgium will speak either Flemish or French as a native language, and then the other national language as a second language, and then also English. And so English is more similar to Flemish than to English. So it turns out that so we have Flemish, they both begin with F. Flemish, French bilinguals, and the French Flemish bilinguals. So these are in the north, these are in the south. So they speak Flemish from the very beginning. Their families are Flemish speakers. They also speak French. In school, they start from grade 1, from the beginning. They learn the other language. And then in the South, it's the reverse. Most people speak French with their families, and they also learn Flemish. And then when it comes time to learn English, it turns out that because English is more similar in terms of grammar, in terms of pronunciation, in terms of vocabulary, more similar to Flemish than to French, these individuals have more L1 influence, and these individuals have more L2 influence, which suggests it's not L1 or L2 exactly, it's which language is more similar to the language you're acquiring. So that would allow you to ask the question, and you don't have to answer it now, it will come up again later, if I have time. If you are a native speaker of Japanese, and you can learn, and you're going to learn English and Chinese, which one's going to have a greater influence? So you learn Japanese, English, and now you're going to learn Chinese. Will Chinese be more influenced by Japanese or more influenced by English? Don't answer. We'll come back to that topic. But that's the kind of idea. So we will look later in the year at L3. This was a topic that at the end of last year, some students told me they were interested in, and it has become a more and more interesting topic. And there will be a special lecture this year, I forget when, in maybe June? Wakabayashi Sensei is hosting a visiting researcher from England, and he is a kind of world specialist on L3 acquisition. And so there'll be a lecture, I'll tell you about it, but there'll be a lecture available. So it would be interesting to hear him teach about that topic. So, I don't remember, that was not the topic I wanted. Oh, right, this term L1 and L2, right? So L1 is your native language. Now, in some cases, if a child grows up in a family and the two parents have different native languages, and each parent uses his or her native language with the children, so as I said, my wife is from America, but imagine my wife were Japanese and I'm from the US, and if I use English with the children and she uses Japanese with the children, from the very beginning, which is L1? It's so quiet. In fact, for people who do research in what's called simultaneous acquisition, so children who grow up acquiring two languages simultaneously at the same time, they are described as having two L1s. So there's not an L1 and an L2, there's just LA and LB. In fact, even A and B implies that A comes before B. So the new way to say that is to have LA and L alpha. Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet. And so children who grow up with two native languages, we refer to them as language A and language alpha in order to distinguish them. And there's lots of work done on this, particularly in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, there are a lot of children in the situation where they have two languages from the very beginning. But not only, I mean, other places. So Belgium is another place, so Brussels. Not really the north of Belgium or the south of Belgium, but in the middle, in the area around Brussels, Bruxelles, it's very bilingual. Or in Canada, in Montreal, French and English are together. So we want to focus on L2 speech comprehension. So that requires us to pay attention to L1 versus L2. A lot of research about speech comprehension is based on L1 speech comprehension. So we need to learn about L1 speech comprehension and then study what's different or special about L2 comprehension. The other important word is speech. So what's the difference between speech and language? I said speech comprehension. I could say language comprehension, but I didn't. I said L2 speech comprehension. Any idea? What is the difference between speech and language? Generally, in the field of psycholinguistics, right? So it's a kind of combination of linguistics and psychology, psycholinguistics. In psycholinguistics, speech is an action. It's something I do. I'm speaking right now. Speech is sound. Speech is outside the body. It leaves my mouth, it hits your ear, it passes out the window, right? Depending on how loud I am. Right? Language is inside your mind. So language is a kind of knowledge. Speech is a kind of action. Because language is knowledge, we can use the language in more than one way. We can use the language in speech, but we can also use the language in writing. Right? It's possible to produce language silently. I can write something down. If someone knows how to read, they can understand the meaning from the written word. Now, there were several cases in history when Europeans first, before they started colonies, but when they just explored, when Europeans began exploring the world, and they went to Africa, and they went to North America, and they would meet societies that have their own languages, of course, but most of them, at least in North America, I'm not sure about Asia, not China, of course, but in many parts of North America where there were hundreds of different languages spoken, none of them was a written language. They only had spoken languages. So when the Europeans, and they were mainly French and Portuguese traders or trappers, they would create some kind of relationship with the local society. And when they show them, when one, let's say one Portuguese person writes some ink on a piece of paper and passes it to another Portuguese person, that person can read the paper, right? Well, so what they did was they had so one example comes from a group of Mohawk. Mohawk is a tribe of Indians. So they were in the Mohawk community, and this Mohawk chief told a secret to this Portuguese man, and he wrote something down on the paper in Portuguese, silently gave the paper to someone else, who then took the paper to another Portuguese person, who then read the Portuguese, and then told the chief this information. They were completely shocked. It was like magic. They couldn't understand how you can communicate through paper. Well, today, it's obvious. It's so much part of your everyday life, you don't even think about it. But in fact, it's a kind of technology. It's a kind of code that you translate from the language you know to a written form. Now, whether your written form uses characters, like kanji, or whether it uses Roman letters, like European languages, or Thai, maybe you've seen Thai written, or Indian languages. There are many different forms of writing, and if you aren't familiar with them, they're completely meaningless. If I show you Arabic, and you just see Arabic, well, it's pretty, but it's not meaningful. The meaning comes from the knowledge of language. Whether it's written form or spoken form, that's just a code, a way of transmitting the knowledge, the information from person A through the air. So even now, my voice passes through my mask even, and the sound travels, and you hear the sound. And sometimes you maybe miss a word, you didn't catch one of the words. If I start speaking too fast and you don't know what I'm saying, and it's harder to follow because I'm going too quickly, you don't know what I'm saying, and if I use some special words to talk about behavioral psychology and I don't know what to do in the neuroscience, and then you've got to see what to do with the fMRI, then you have a harder time catching the. But still, when I use words you know, you catch them, right? And that raises another topic which we will look at, which is the role of speed in speech processing. Even among native speakers, some people naturally speak faster than others. Sometimes you see on TV game shows, they have someone who is very gifted, very talented, very skillful at speaking quickly, right? And even for native speakers, it's hard to follow, although usually you understand more than you feel like you hear. Like blah, 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 blah. Ah, somehow there's a kind of loop in your mind. So speed will become a factor that we look at in terms of this process. So when I say speech, we want to know, how is it that we pull out meaning from sound? If you think about it, language at its simplest description is a connection between sound and meaning. Okay? The The most basic would be a word. Okay? So the word, pick a word. Give me any one-syllable English word. Anybody? One-syllable English word. Nobody wants to suggest.
Car.
Car. Excellent example. Another one. Somebody else. There's so many. It's so much choice you can't even think. One syllable. 音節一つしか。
Bar.
Huh? Bar?
Bar.
Bar? You mean like a bar where people drink?
Drink.
Oh my goodness, okay, yeah. It's just bar and car, they're almost the same. Okay, all right, yes. Any others? Okay, I'll use car. So car, right? The k.
T.
There's no meaning to k. Ah. There's no meaning to ah. And there's no meaning to Only when all the sounds are together, it means car. But only to someone who knows the word. Right? If I tell you a different word, I'll tell you sloop. Yeah, it's a real English word, sloop. But if you don't know the word, even hearing it correctly, because you're not even sure, right? What did he say? Sloop, right? Sloop is a kind of boat. It's a kind of boat with a sail, and it's a sloop. And it's a certain length and a certain size, so it's a kind of special term. If you know the meaning of the word, and you hear sloop in the middle of the sentence, you catch it. But if you don't know the word, right, if I begin to talk about the synapses of something, the synapses of the frog, right? You say, huh? What did he say? It's an unfamiliar word. So catching unfamiliar words, even in your native language, can sometimes be difficult. Catching unfamiliar words in a non-native language, nearly impossible. But sometimes that's the way people learn new words, if there's enough support. Okay, so we want to know this process of L2 speech, and then finally, comprehension. It does not say, I need a better eraser. No better. These two are similar, they're related, but they're different. Speech comprehension and speech perception. So perception is related to perceive, and comprehension is comprehend. What's the difference? Speech perception, to perceive something, is to hear it, to notice it. Actually, to perceive something could be see, hear, taste, smell. These are forms of perception. But speech perception means hearing sounds, recognizing sounds as sounds. Perception does not include meaning. The key to comprehension is it means understanding meaning. That includes understanding the meanings of words. It also means interpreting the meaning in context. So in some cases, we use language in a way that is not literal. So we have idioms, metaphors, expressions where meanings are used a bit differently. Right? If someone comes in completely tired, oh, Wednesday, 5th period, oh God, I'm tired. Oh my, how are you? I'm great. Right? Well, I can use the word great, but I don't mean great. Right? In certain contexts, people can understand that I'm being, in this case, sarcastic or non-literal in my language use. So we really want to know comprehension of speech. How do we catch the meaning out of L2 speech? So some of that will require learning about the sounds of speech. So some of that will, for those of you who were in the seminar last year, we will need to repeat some of the content. We'll need to review, for example. I'm sure you'll be happy to hear. We'll need to review things like fundamental frequency and F1 and F2, because these are properties that are important for speech perception. Speech perception leads to speech comprehension. You can't understand, you can't comprehend what you don't perceive. If you don't perceive something, you don't hear it, it can't lead to comprehension. So we will, in our effort to understand speech comprehension, we need to have a basic understanding of speech perception. So we will be doing some of that. Now, to introduce it, I've decided to add some reading, not this kind of reading. I don't mean reading before bedtime for pleasure. I mean reading, I have a textbook that I have taken a few chapters out of called Psycholinguistics 101. The reason it's called Psycholinguistics 101 is because American universities always have a course number. And course numbers are 3 digits, and the first number indicates the year. So a first year course is a 100 level course, a second year course is a 200 level course, a third year course is a 300 level course. Now, the system works differently there, so second year students can also take 300 level courses. It's allowed, but it just helps you to understand the order. And sometimes, in order to take a 300 level course, you have to first finish a 200 level course. Well, 101 is the very first course in any kind of field. And so Psycholinguistics 101 is like an English expression for something like pneumo, right? You'll see books like Shinrigengogaku Pneumo, Introduction to Psycholinguistics, but this sounds a little more, I don't know, fun. Not really fun, but casual. So, the chapters that I have copied, I have created a PDF file, and it's available on Manaba. Down at the bottom, there's a section called Contents. And you'll see I've made a page called Materials, and I will add content there throughout the term. So far, there's just this one PDF file. So what I'd like you to do for next week is just read chapter 1. And it's a bit of background. In fact, not all of chapter 1. So the chapter 1, pages 1 to 13. You'll see that on page 13, 14, and 15, it said it's like, in the rest of the book, we're going to have this information. You don't need to read about the outline of the book. Okay? It's a very small book, so the pages are quite small. It looks like it's 13 pages, which it's true, it is 13 pages, but they're small pages, so it's not too much, I think. It has some history of psycholinguistics, but it also lays out 3 main approaches to studying psycholinguistics. So we will refer to that next week. So you will find that. And I'll post it as a homework assignment, but just I'm telling you now to check Manaba, where you will find a PDF file. And I think the PDF file includes chapters 1, 2, and 3 maybe. You don't need to read any further yet. We'll be using the later chapters later. Okay, what I'd like to do, do I have time? I don't think I have time. 20 minutes. Well, okay, I'll do this in 2 ways. Okay. First, again, normally I would just pass the papers out. I'm going to give you 1 page to each person. So just please take one. And there are a set of questions for us to think about. We won't have enough. I was going to have a kind of discussion activity where you are in groups of 3 or 4, but I think we don't have time to do that properly today. So we may come back to that next week. Today, what we'll do is I will discuss the same questions as a whole group. See if that works or not. Try. Hey, is this lacrosse? You play lacrosse? Oh, wow. You? You? Now the same questions are going to appear. Let's see if I can do this properly. Let's see here. So as I said, I wanted to do this as a small group where you could discuss with maybe 2 other students. But I don't think I have time to both complete the list as a group and discuss them as a class. So we'll do it in the opposite direction. So if you could please take out your phone again, or your tablet or your computer, I'll ask you these questions and just you don't know the answer. The idea is to kind of guess the answer, and then we're going to learn about it next. So what impression, what intuition, what idea do you have before you study, and then after we study, we'll see that what things you got right, or you were correct in your guess, and what things you need to understand differently. So the first one, which direction do you think is easier to translate? From L1 to L2, or from L2 to L1? And in your case, if L1 is Japanese and L2 is in English, then is it easier to translate Japanese into English or English into Japanese? Which is easier? And now there's a difference, actually, between translation. You don't need to worry about this, but later we'll learn about the difference between translation and interpreting. Interpreting is verbal. Interpreters hear speech in language A and produce speech in language B. Right? So, and they have some special training for that. So people are mixed. Okay, so 2/3 of the group says L2 to L1, and 1/3 of the group says L1 to L2. Right? I'm not going to give an answer today. We'll come back to that topic after we have learned something about that kind of research. Number 2. Now I'd like you to think about the different languages involved. Oops, I should hide that. Which language is easier for Korean native speakers to acquire as L2? English or Japanese? Which language would be easier for Korean native speakers to to acquire as L2? English or Japanese? So 2/3 of the group or more said probably Japanese is easier, and 1/3 of the students say that English might be easier. We'll be able to answer that question a little more knowledgeably in about 2 or 3 weeks. Next. I see nothing. Is there something on your phone? There is? Sorry, I'll move that. Moment. We already saw it. What's it? Which language is easier for Japanese native speakers to acquire as L2? English or Chinese? And wow, most people said Chinese. Really, is that true? Interesting. Easier to learn Chinese than English. I'm a little surprised. Many people tell me it's a bit difficult to learn like the tones of Chinese, like the difference between, ma, ma. Okay. Let's get rid of those. Which explanation do you think accounts for difficulties with L2 speech sounds? Do you think L2 speech sounds are difficult to say because they are difficult to hear? Or L2 speech sounds are difficult to hear because they are difficult to say? You see the difference? Is the difficulty in hearing causing problems with speaking? Or is the difficulty in speaking making it hard to hear? Which direction do you think influences the difficulty in L2 speech sounds? The answers are coming in more slowly. I realize you don't know, you're not sure. The idea is to get a feel for what your impression is. So twice as many people have said L2 speech sounds are difficult to say because they're difficult to hear. And we'll study. So those of you who were here last year, we will repeat 2 theories known as the perceptual assimilation model and the speech learning model. According to the perceptual assimilation model, it's the top one. According to the speech learning model, it's the bottom one, which tells you there isn't a clear answer yet. It seems to be that both directions are difficult under some circumstances, in some cases. The question now is, what are those circumstances? Under what conditions do we find support for sounds being the problem to hear? And under what conditions do we find sounds difficult to say? That's the important part. Okay. How does learning words, I missed the word in. Sorry. Learning words in written form and spoken form at the same time affect learning? So for example, children learn words first. They learn the sounds of words and the meanings of words. Later, they learn how to read and write. Second language learners usually learn both at the same time. We usually learn how to say the word and how to write the word at the same time. The question is, do you think learning written and spoken forms at the same time helps the acquisition of L2 vocabulary or hurts the acquisition of L2 vocabulary? people don't want to choose. Oh, wow, big difference. Okay, sorry. So most people believe it helps. And to be honest, there's some debate about this. And there are some different teaching methodologies based on the different approaches. So, for example, for those people who believe learning how you write the word hurts the acquisition, there's a method of teaching that is sound only. So, for example, when English native speakers begin to study Japanese, usually, like just the very first class, the very first lesson, and you're going to learn some Japanese words, some Japanese phrases, and maybe some basic Japanese sentences, but you haven't yet learned reading and writing. You haven't learned kana, you haven't learned hiragana, katakana. So they will write words in alphabet letters, right? Japanese words in alphabet letters. So when you see the word gozaimasu written, right, English speakers see those letters and they think of them as English letters. Now, for those people who believe that it hurts, and there isn't an answer, so there's not a right answer or a wrong answer, but there are some people who believe that the English learners of Japanese suffer from English written forms, and so they will pronounce such words using English stress, English segments. So, no, it wasn't gozaimasu, it was onegai shimasu. So, onegai shimasu becomes, so it's, how do I describe it? So the onegai, the g in onegai is not usually, well, according to what I learned, is not a g, like a hard g, like English, right? G. Right? So English speakers will say, and I can't even remember how, onegai shimasu. Okay? Onegai shimasu. If you see written in alphabetic letters, O-N-E-G-A-I, S-H-I-M-A-S-U, right? We see that and automatically think of the English sounds that match the writing. Right? Onegai shimasu. Well, if you say onegai shimasu, people don't know what you're saying, right? So in that way, you have to overcome the way your native language writes sounds. Now, for Japanese and English, that's not usually a problem because they have different writing systems. But when English learners acquire French or Spanish, it's very difficult to overcome their English tendencies. So those teaching methods will be sound only. The problem with sound only is memory. How do you remember the words? If you write something down, you will help you to remember the word. That's why we have writing, right? We can remember information from history by writing books, and future generations can learn about the past from writing. So it's very useful. But the question is whether it helps or hurts acquiring the words in a new language. We'll come to that later. Which should come first when, now, if, as it says on the paper answers this a little bit differently. I didn't have space, but it says 6. If learning written forms and spoken forms for new words separately, which should come first? Written forms or spoken forms? Again, there's not a correct answer, but most people have said spoken forms. Spoken forms more closely resembles how children learn words. They learn the words, the sound and the meaning first, and then how to write it. The trouble with that is it's kind of slow. It takes children several years to acquire language. If they start at 1, Well, they learn a lot by 3, but they learn more by 5. That's several years. Writing can help us more quickly get some basic knowledge. So there's not a right answer. There are various factors that influence it. Now, what did that happen? So lots of people like to use multimedia for learning. And now maybe you've seen, like there's Netflix for language learning. You can get an additional app that helps you use Netflix movies or TV shows for language learning. And different people like to use them differently. So what's your impression? Again, there's not a right answer or a wrong answer, but what do you think is most useful for language learning from movies and TV shows from foreign countries? Just watching the video with the original audio only, or watching the video with original audio plus the same language captions. That means if it's an English movie with English captions. If I'm watching a Japanese movie with Japanese captions. That's what same language means. Or original audio with native language subtitles. In English, we make a difference between captions and subtitles. Subtitles are translations. If I watch a German movie with English subtitles, or a Japanese movie with English subtitles, or captions would be the same language. So which of those do you think would be the most effective or most useful for language learning? And most people say with captions. And the answer, well, we'll see later, but it's kind of a trick to ask these questions because the answer is usually different for different learners. Right? So if you have highly proficient non-native speakers, they will often benefit from audio only. If you have very low learners, they sometimes do well to first watch it with subtitles to get the meaning of the story, and then go back and watch it again. For my level, which is kind of in between, so I will watch Japanese TV shows with Japanese audio only, and then I'll go back and watch it with subtitles, with captions, and then I'll catch more. Because sometimes I don't catch, sometimes there's words I don't know, and sometimes there's words I know, but I didn't catch them. Because in conversational language, sometimes people don't say a little bit at the end or something, right? So using these together can also help. I think in my mind, it would be good to do audio only, audio with captions, and then audio only again. But to be honest, if you're watching it the third time, it's kind of boring. Right? You already know the story, you already know what happens, so it's not really very interesting. And it is very important to keep the content interesting. Young children, when they're first learning their native language, are interested. They want to know what's happening around them. They don't care about language. They only care about meaning. And they listen to your sound and all of that. So there's not an easy answer to many of these questions, but all right. Sorry, we're going to skip that one because okay. What? Which? Yeah, we will be studying this. So I mentioned I'll stop with this one. So see what you can think of, some possible answers. That's weird. Why is that there? I'm not sure. What cues are there? Maybe this will be, I had hoped to have you discuss this as a group first. So we'll save this question for next week. But let me explain the question. So I said before that speech comprehension requires catching words from continuous fluent speech. So when I say continuous fluent speech, right, there's no stopping, right? Continuous fluent speech. Continuous is a kind of long word. So it could be continuous, but it's not. It's continuous. It could be tenuous flu. but it's not. The flu is part of fluent, the tenuous is part of continuous, and you catch that. Continuous fluent speech. If I record my audio and show you on the computer, and if you're new, you don't know this software we use, but Pratt, if you remember Pratt. If I record my speech in Pratt, yay! I see some very happy faces. Yeah, Pratt, yay! If I record my voice in Pratt, say continuous fluent speech, there's no break. But there are cues. There are things that show us sequences of sounds that occur only between words and never inside words. So we'll see that there are cues like that that can help us spot the beginning, notice the beginnings and ends of words, but we're also influenced by our knowledge of the information in the conversation. So you're listening for meaning, and if I'm talking to you about, let's think of, I'm talking to you about my son's new car, and he was driving it for the first time when a ball rolled into the road, and he had to brake hard to stop. And then I tell you about my daughter who was walking down the stairs, and she was going to fall down the stairs and break her arm. Now, in both cases, I've used the word brake. But you didn't have any problem knowing that brake in the first story refers to part of the car that stops the car, the brake. Okay? And in the second story, I'm talking about the bone of my daughter's arm, brake. So there are two sources of information when comprehending speech. And you'll read about this in pages 1 to 13, around page 10 or 11, the difference between bottom-up information and top-down information. So that will be the topic that we focus on next week, is listening using bottom-up and top-down comprehension. Okay? So please check Manaba, download the PDF. If you have any troubles, send me an email. Even if you have questions, send me an email. If you want to know my favorite food, don't send me an email. We'll stop there. That's all there is for today. Have a nice week, a nice weekend, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you.